Hiya, I'm Lily and today I'd love to share with you a few tips for when we're stamping onto acetate. Now, stamping onto acetate is a really fun and exciting technique. It allows us to get lots of different effects when we come to doing our stamping techniques with crafting. We can create floating effects and lots of other brilliant effects, for example in apertures. But I just want to share with you what sort of ink pads we need to use when we are stamping onto acetate. Now, acetate, as we can see, it's this sort of clear medium and it's different to paper in that it's not made up of fibres. It's actually non-porous. So with a lot of ink pads, what you'll find is the ink actually sits on the surface and won't dry, which is not what we want. So we need to make sure that we choose the right sort of ink pad that will actually dry onto acetate. Now, it is slightly shiny and slightly slippy, so we do need to bear that in mind when we come to stamping onto acetate. But once you've mastered the basics and you know what you're doing, it's really fun and easy to do, and I think you'll be stamping onto acetate quite a lot once you know how to do it. So all I've done is I've taken a piece of acetate and I've just cut it down to size so that it matches roughly the size of stamp that I'm using. The stamp that I'm using is a rare earth stamp. It's from the Half-Light Haven collection and it's this lovely moth design, as you can see here. But of course you can use whatever stamp you like to stamp onto acetate. Sentiments work particularly nicely, perhaps in an aperture, in a shaped card, or anything at all. So whatever stamp you've got, you can definitely stamp onto acetate as long as you choose the right ink pad. So I'm going to start by taking my acrylic block. Now, of course, you could be using a stamping platform like your load and fold if you would prefer, but in this case, I'm just going to be using my acrylic block. And given that these are clear stamps, they will literally just cling to your acrylic block like so. Now, if you find the stamp is struggling to stick to the acrylic block or your load and fold, it might be that it just needs a little wash. There might be a little bit of residue, perhaps a little bit of embossing powder or ink on the back of your stamp, and just giving that a wash with warm soapy water, you'll find that that cleans the stamp off nicely, and then it will cling once again, just like new, to your acrylic block. Now, ink pads. The ink pad we choose to stamp onto acetate is absolutely crucial. Now, the ink pad we're going to be using today is a StazOn. Now, this is a solvent-based ink pad and it will dry on most surfaces that are non-porous. So while it will dry on paper, which is a porous surface, it will also dry on surfaces like our acetate, even ceramics, coated cardstocks, anything like that that's non-porous, and you might find that a normal, say, pigment or dye ink pad would struggle to dry on. StazOn is a good option for surfaces like that. Now, I've chosen jet black. There are different colours within the range, within the StazOn range, and you can explore those given what technique you're wanting to focus on and what effect you want. But I've just chosen jet black, just so it shows up easily so you can see it nice and well. So it's a solvent-based ink pad. On lower quality stamps, it can damage your stamps if you don't clean them quite soon after. So definitely make sure that you clean your stamps as soon as it's been used. But with quality stamps like rare earth, it should not be a problem at all. Now, it does have quite a strong odour, so I would definitely recommend that you use it in a well-ventilated area. So get a window open or something like that. It comes with a little plastic sort of shield on the ink pad just to protect it. Apart from that, it's just a regular ink pad really. There's nothing unusual or different about it. It's just the composition, the type of ink that it is, that lends itself to stamping onto acetate so wonderfully. Just as another little aside here, we can be using embossing powders onto acetate as long as we use a heat-resistant acetate. So if you have got heat-resistant acetate, you can stamp onto the acetate with a pigment-based ink pad. Now, if we stamp onto acetate with a pigment-based ink pad, we will find that it won't dry. However, if we add embossing powder over the top and then melt that embossing powder using a heat gun, that will be absolutely fine and it will have dried because we've got the embossing powder set on the surface of the acetate. So that's just another option, but do make sure you've got heat-resistant acetate if you are going to heat emboss onto it, otherwise it will end up melting, which is not what we want. But back to what we're going to be doing today, which is using StazOn, and we're not going to be using embossing powder. As it's a quick drying ink, it will dry far too quickly for us to actually get the embossing powder onto there. So just like we would ink up any of our stamps using any of our inks, we're taking our ink pad, in this case our StazOn ink pad, to the stamp, which is a clear stamp so you can see exactly what we're inking up, which is brilliant. and just gentle tapping all over the image just to give it an even coat of ink. And I'm going to pop the lid on that, otherwise my elbow will be going in there, and of course it does dry on most surfaces, so you don't really want to get it on your clothes if you can help it. So I've got a piece of white cardstock underneath my acetate, basically just so I can see what I'm doing a little bit easier. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to position my stamp in the centre, press down nice and firmly. Do take a little bit of care because the stamp can slip around a little bit with acetate being a slippy surface. But as you can see, you get the image stamped onto there like so. Now, if we would like to colour in that image, we can use a alcohol pen. So I've just got my Ink Lilly alcohol pens here. Now we can't use a water-based medium as basically it just won't be able to cling to the acetate and it won't dry. So by using an alcohol-based pen like our Ink Lilly pens, we can actually colour onto acetate. And we tend to do this from the reverse. So if I just turn my image over, and I've taken number 102, just this brown Ink Lilly pen, and using the brush nib, we can literally just go in there and colour in the image. Now, excuse the squeaky sound, it is a little bit unpleasant, but we can just colour that in like so, very, very easily. So, colouring in the image. Now, of course, you don't have to colour in the image if you don't want to, but just to add a little bit of colour onto there, like so. And then that gives you, as you can see, it wasn't quite dry yet on the acetate, so it does dry quickly, but it doesn't dry instantly. So do just give that a minute to dry. And as you can see, very easily, we've created our own, what could be an embellishment for a card if we were to fussy cut around it. It could be anything really on a card. It could be any image whatsoever, stamped onto acetate, using our StazOn and adding a little bit of colour using our Ink Lilly alcohol pens.